Thank you. It's Contente. Yeah, just remember happy. It's Contente. So, focus on the light. I might just have to change my entire talk now. Speaking of which, it's interesting because you might not know this, but as speakers, we need to provide the name of our talk way before we actually write the talks. So it was interesting, my daughter was sitting with me when I was trying to figure out what I was going to, the title of my talk would be. And she says, Mom, how do you know what you're going to talk about if it's not even then yet? I said, well, you just kind of write the talk after you name the talk. So put all that aside, because I want to say Happy Goddess of Fertility Day. How many of you knew that? Nobody knew that, right? Goddess of fertility, right? So fertility is all about reproducing the quality of what we produce. And how perfect that the Goddess of Fertility Day is today on my talk, because I hope to produce a quality talk for all of you. Right? But we are always producing something. Right? We are always planting those seeds. So my question for all of you is, what seeds are we planting? Are we planting seeds of joy, of love, of prosperity and abundance? Or are we reproducing more of those negative thoughts of fear, of doubt, of fear, doubt, fright, anger? I don't even want to think about all those negative thoughts. But we're always producing something. And here it is, almost spring, right? Spring is Tuesday, right? March 20th this year. And so during spring, all those seeds that we planted way back in the fall are now springing forward. So the question for all of us is, what is springing forward for us? Tanya, what's it called? The grapevine. The grapevine. I don't know why they call it the grapevine. I never see any grapes. I always wondered about it. Always wondered about that. Yes, because it kind of winds around a little bit. But it was the first time on this drive that we actually did see green. It really did feel like spring, but juxtaposed against the white of the mountains. It was just breathtakingly beautiful. So even if you have no reason to leave Bakersfield today, I encourage you to drive the grapevine before all that snow is melted, because it was just gorgeous. It was just gorgeous. So I want to share a little bit about Ernest Holmes in this talk today. I love the book that I chose for the reading, which is this thing called You. It's one of my absolute favorite books. And, if we are truly rooted in the divine, then why are so many of us dissatisfied with the lives that we lead? So Ernest Holmes says, we have to guard well this garden of our mind. It is God's garden of your soul. It is your garden of Eden, wherein may grow your fondest desires and hopes, blossoming into fulfillment. Or, if you permit, the weeds of destruction, fear, and doubt will choke out the beauty of hope until despair alone remains. Right? So these seeds of despair, right? Seeds that spring forth not into joy, but into those worrisome thoughts that we have. Waking up and worrying, oh my God, am I going to get there on time? Right? Opening up the refrigerator and worrying, what am I going to cook for dinner? Or the more serious worries that we have, right? What's that pain, right? I hope that doesn't turn into something. I just sneezed. I hope I'm not going to get the flu. Or worrying how you're going to pay the bills, right? Those worrisome thoughts, right? Or those seeds of despair that are more serious, worrying about what's going on out in the world, fearful, afraid to turn the news on, right? Because, I don't want to hear another story about, what's going on in the schools with guns, or what's going on halfway around the world in war-torn zones. Right? Where is all the humanity and the civility? Right? What are the seeds that are being planted? Right? Those are those seeds of despair. So Ernest Holmes tells us that the soil is fertile. We have to make sure, and his quote exactly correct. He says we are always planting something. Therefore, the subjective mind soil must be in the right condition all the time. So the right condition all the time. So how do we make sure that this fertile soil is in the right condition? Well, my husband and I were talking about this on the drive up today, and I actually asked him that question. I said, how do we do that? Right? How do we do that? Well, it is about being vigilant. We have to really pay attention to the thoughts that we plant here. We have to be consummate gardeners, right? Tilling the soil all the time. Right? So how do we till the soil? Mindfulness is one way of doing that, really paying attention all the time to what we're thinking. Because we know thoughts are things, right? Everything that we think here creates itself and manifests in form. So we have to be constantly paying attention, right? Having practices, spiritual practice like meditation is a great way to till that soil. Doing readings, reading from Ernest Holmes or Emerson or Troward, or listening to beautiful spiritual music. Right? Always paying attention and having a practice that allows us to do that. Right? So it is all about, right, being rooted in the divine. And we are always rooted in the divine at all times. So really it's about, are we planting the seeds that we want to grow? Are we planting those seeds of goodwill? And Ernest Holmes also teaches us and tells us that we should be planting seeds of peace and joy, of love and goodwill. And the title of my talk today is Goodwill is God's Will. Right? Because this week is God's will. That is your practice for this week. Right? Is God's will. And it is God's will for us to be peaceful, happy, healthy. Right? It is God's will for us to be good citizens of the world. Right? To be kind to each other, to be compassionate, to be loving. And it is God's will to have a beautiful, peaceful world. It's all one thing. Right? God's will is your will. It's my will. It's our will because we are that expression of God. Right? So in order for us to really live this teaching, is we have to step forward, always rooted in the divine. Right? Always rooted in truth. Right? It's about being vigilant all the time. So we want to make sure as well that we are paying attention, as I said earlier, to those thoughts and tilling that garden. So if we're not living the lives that we want, we've just let way too many weeds grow there. Right? How many of you have gardens? Curiosity, right? So what happens if you don't go out and pay attention to your garden? It's overgrown, right? With things that we don't want. Right? We have to make sure that we're out there pulling those weeds at all times. Otherwise, whatever wants to grow, if we haven't paid attention, it's gonna grow. Right? If we're not paying attention to the thoughts that we put into our minds, right, we may be living a life that we don't want to live. Right? So Ernest Holmes also encourages us to visit our garden regularly, that we should commune there, for us to be rooted in the divine. Right? And when we are with each other, communing with each other, it reminds us as well of our own sacredness. Right? We don't need to come here to remember that we are sacred and we're divine, but what a beautiful place to be reminded of that. And the goodwill that we want to spread, a lot of places that we do that is through our own spiritual centers, right? There's a lot of beautiful work that's done through our spiritual centers, a lot of goodwill towards men that we do. For myself, I'm an outreach minister. I'm with the Global Truth Center of Los Angeles, but I'm rarely at the Global Truth Center of Los Angeles because I am an outreach minister. I go out into the world to spread, I hope, goodwill, hope words of wisdom, but it's really more about being of service, right? God's will, goodwill, is about being of service. And so there's so many wonderful things that we can do, and I've talked about this in other talks, our circle of compassion. I spoke last week at the Center for Spiritual Living in Santa Clarita, and right after service we made 60 sandwiches, right, 60 sandwiches for the homeless, and this is something that they do once a month, and I know most churches do things along those lines, right, doing something to help each other in their community. There's opportunities all the time. We're going to go volunteer through, as an alumni of the University of Buffalo, where I went to school, actually State University of New York at Buffalo. I want to get that right if there's any UB people out there, which I don't think, but just in case. They're having an alum event where we're going to go downtown to the LA Food Bank and sort food in the food pantry. I used to volunteer for a program called Makeovers That Matter, and it was a whole 12-week program helping women vets when they would come back to reorient and get back into the workforce. And I would do a presentation on mindfulness and how to create the life that you want through literally remembering this beautiful garden and setting the right intention, creating thoughts so that they manifest with the life that you want. So it's about looking at rooted in the divine, in that we are always rooted in the divine. We cannot be anything but rooted in the divine. So it doesn't really matter what thoughts you plant there, because it's always divine. That's the beautiful thing about this teaching, is we're at choice. We get to choose the thoughts that we want. So if you look around and your life isn't exactly what you want it to be, right? And mine's not exactly the way I want it to be, right? Just because I get to stand up here and be your minister of the day doesn't mean that I have the perfect life. It means that I teach what I need to learn. So I'm constantly looking at my thoughts, and thank God for my husband who reminds me as well. Don't talk about what you don't want. Tell me what you do want. Tell me what you want. Stop complaining about all the things that aren't working, right? Talk about what you want. Share what it is that you want. Speak as if you already have it. Because we're always rooted in the divine. That soil is fertile. It will take whatever you put into it, good, bad, ugly, or beautiful. Or beautiful. So with spring about to sprung, did I say that right? It didn't sound right after I heard it come out of my head. Yeah, you know what I meant. With spring just literally bumping at us, right? If there are things popping up in your gardens that are not what you want, it is not too late to get out there and pull those weeds. We need to be constantly pulling those weeds and paying attention, making sure that we are living the life that we want, that we are spreading goodwill, that we are doing God's will, because God's will is our will. We are all divine expressions of God. So if I'm not doing good out in the world, I'm really not doing good here either, right? And if I'm not doing good for myself, I'm certainly not helping anyone else. It is all one thing. But here's another piece of that, right? Take care of yourself. Because if you treat yourself with care, with loving care, right, you will be that divine expression of God in the world. And people will gravitate to you. They want to know, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Right? Because you're a beautiful expression. So we are always rooted in the divine. We are always doing God's good work, our work. And so it is always our choice to choose the life that we want, to make sure that we are living as if, stepping forward into that life, and knowing that if we don't like what we see, if we don't like the flowers or the plants, not only can we pull the weeds, but we can literally pull the whole thing out and start all over again. So, let me ask you again, the first question. Do you like your garden? All right, beautiful. Because we are all gods and goddesses of fertility. That soil is always fertile, and we are always producing, reproducing, and creating. And so I challenge all of us today, tomorrow, the next day, throughout the rest of the year, throughout the rest of our lives, to be those beautiful gods and goddesses of fertility and create just beauty, create just joy, create prosperity and peace. Find the one thing that truly is an expression of who you are and focus on that. Whether it's creating a beautiful masterpiece, play, or music, or paintings, or just speaking, or just being who you are in the world, be that. Be it beautifully, be it joyfully. Just be who you are. So with that, I'm just going to invite us to know that truth. Right? So if it's comfortable, you can close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath in and out. So whether we are going in or we're going out, we are always in the divine. We're always rooted in divine because it's only one thing, and it's God, it's spirit, it's universe. It is who we are always. And I know that for each and every person here, the seeds that are being planted right now are seeds of joy, of love, of prosperity, of peace. And I know that each one of us is a consummate gardener, weeding those weeds of destruction, those weeds that no longer serve us, those thoughts that are not supporting. And I know that each and every one of us goes forth doing God's good work, doing our good work, the goodwill of man, being of service in our communities, being of service to ourselves and our families, knowing that it's one thing. And I'm so grateful to be reminded of this truth, to be in the fertile soil of love and life, knowing that I get to choose the path that I want. I get to choose the flowers. And today they are blooming. And they continue to bloom throughout the year. And so with gratitude and thanksgiving, I release my word because the law says yes. And together we say, and so it is. Namaste.